Do the UConn Huskies have the best offensive weapons in college basketball? You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask for a small favor. If you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Then go over to your phone right here. Go to Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your audio podcasts. Download the audio version as well. If you are a subscriber, please download the audio version. It helps us create more revenue for the podcast. And guess what? This allows us to help build our UConn community. We are generating revenue for UConn NIL. 10% of those proceeds go to those initiatives with Bleeding Blue for Good. And there's also something else that I'm excited about from a charitable perspective. I'm donating 10% of all revenue to the Husky Ticket Project. I'm proud to partner with them. They help my hometown, Meriden, Connecticut Boys Club. Love it. Had to get with Kevin Solomon and then. So thank you for being a part of this journey and making a difference. Your support is our support towards them. And thank you for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay. Let's bring in my new co-host for Tuesdays and Thursdays going forward, Dan Meehan. Let's get you in here. So Dan was at the scrimmage last night, and I posed this question to you and to UConn Nation that's following. Does UConn have the best offensive weapons in college basketball right now?
They're certainly up there. They are, after seeing last night, I think coming into the first game, most UConn fans knew how deep this team was going to be. Finding a defined starting five, and then 7, 8. No one knew what it's going to look like beyond that top 7, top 8. Who's going to emerge of the freshmen and sophomores? Who's going to get those minutes coming in off the bench? But it was evident last night that, similar to the theme of the last 2 years, UConn's depth is just going to be a major problem for teams. I know URI isn't, top 10, top 20, even top 25, not as good as the teams they're going to be facing when, once they get into the thick of things in the Big East tournament and beyond. But that's still a Division I college team. Within the first 10 minutes of the second half, their legs were gone. All the shots were coming up short. And it was evident that UConn's fresh legs, just rotationally coming off the bench, is going to wear on teams similar to how it has the last few years. So do they have individually the best, do they have a top 5 NBA scorer? I don't even know if they had that last year. And it wasn't an issue. The way that this team is structured defensively, the way they play offensively to get efficient shots, I think will be more so the story if this team is successful as opposed to just one or two individual stars on offense.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, but when we look at we talked about this pre-show, like the two teams that are ranked ahead of them now in the preseason AP poll are Kansas and Alabama. If we put our guys, like, let's take it one by one, right? The biggest advantage that Kansas and Alabama are going to have against UConn, if they were to go head to head, let's say we're all in the Final Four, is interior presence, because Alabama has Cliff Amoriu, who's 6'11", and probably the best athlete on their team, which is crazy to say. And then you have Kansas that has Hunter Dickinson, who's 7'1" and is in year 37 of his college career. And he was impressive against Donovan Clingan. He wasn't fantastic, but he at least took it to Donovan. And he's in this new kind of NBA where he can at least shoot it a little bit from deep. He's going to be an NBA player at some point, maybe a bench piece. But then we look at I think the team that you really can say, if they put it together, is going to give our UConn players on the offensive side the biggest run for our money is Kansas. They have AJ Storr, Dajuan Harris, Zeke Mayo, Rylan Griffin. KJ Adams was a handful last year. He's going to get better. Noah Shelby is a transfer. I put them up with UConn. I mean, Alex, Liam, Solo, yep. Jay Stu looked great last night. Aidan was fantastic. Obviously, even Ahmad off the bench. Jay Ross hit a couple of threes last night. So I think the only person that didn't really play I say good, like from a scoring perspective, offensive game is Haas, and he had 9 assists. So like,
Yep.
it's just one of those things where you're right. Like, it's going to be a different guy every night. I don't know. I don't. When people talk about Alabama, I have a hard time with that because Mark Sears and Grant Nelson are there, and they've got some transfers, but Nate Oates runs a not as complicated of a system as Dan Hurley, but I have a hard time that these guys are going to be able to, get to where they were last year just because they threw some fresh talent in the mix.
Yeah. Hell of a coach in Alabama, hell of a coach in Kansas. I think Alabama is going to be similar to UConn, getting the most out of every guy, and that's where they're going to do their damage as opposed to, relying on a 20-point scorer every night. And truthfully, in college basketball, I don't think you want to rely upon a 20-point scorer every night. Kansas is loaded. They're loaded. I have no issue with them being atop some of the standings, preseason, and the rankings, whether that's the metrics or AP. Hunter Dickinson, proven college player. He's 7'2". We know he's going to be there and be steady for them. AJ Storr, the transfer. These guys are kind of already proven, whether they're coming in from the transfer portal or not. Those guys are not going to be shy of confidence. I think Kansas last year had a really good team, but faced some injuries down the stretch that kind of took them out of it and kind of hindered their ceiling come March and April. But UConn has no shortage of offensive weapons. They're going to be very efficient every night, whether that's down low or from the three. I think the way that the personnel on this UConn team as it's currently constructed is a little bit geared more towards your, quote unquote, small ball, as opposed to the last few years where you could dump the ball down to Klingon for a lob or, a layup against a undersized defender, or the year before with Adama, who could get a layup anytime he wanted.
You know what though, Dan? Let me stop you right there. I think and you were there, but I saw a couple of instances in particular in the second half where Sampson looked good on the post. They're not going to ask him to do it a ton, but I feel like if the game allows it, right? Like when because Donovan really didn't need to do this very often because of how good this offense flows. But when they played Illinois and they were like, they have nobody that can stop you, we're dumping it down to our 7'1" guy and he's going to dominate them. Like Sampson got a ball on the block and went at I forget the guy's name, but did like a little fake and shot a little jump hook. Terrace got into the mix a little bit, had 8 points and 10 rebounds. So I think what people are not you, but what people are kind of failing to see in the long run is, yes, are we going to have these positional versatility, positionless basketball for most of the year? Sure, but if we have a game that's like a rock fight where no one's hitting, we still do have two guys, and you can even throw Alex in the mix on that can back you down and probably do something offensively. So I want that to be part of this conversation too, that UConn really doesn't have any holes offensively that you can really think of.
And I think that's the way they like to construct the team. 5 years ago, we had to take whatever we could get and build them and mold them into better players. Now we have the luxury of winning a couple championships in a row and bringing in guys that are already skilled and ready to go coming out of high school. Liam McNeeley, I don't think anyone's really worried about his offensive versatility. Defenses, we'll see how that looks as the season progresses. But last night he showed, on the curl on the first play of the game, layup, wrapping around a screen, looked really athletic. He's hitting everything pregame. I'm not worried about his offensive game. First half, I thought Terrace looked a little shaky with the ball in his hand. But by the second half, he understood what he was able to do with his body and was moving defenders at will to get his shot off. I'm really excited to see how he progresses. And some of the guys off the bench, I mean, like you said, Hassan might have had, been overshadowed by Mahaney last night coming off the bench, but still had 9 assists and he was efficient. The team shot, I think, 56% from three.
Yep. 48% from three, 57% overall.
Okay. But
either
way,
one shot short of 50% from three. They were 13 of 28.
And I don't think that's going anywhere. They're not going to shoot 45% every night, but the way this team is constructed, again, they're wing heavy and everybody can shoot. Dan Hurley likes guys that can dribble at every position and shoot the basketball, and I think that they have some of that on this squad.
Yeah, and before we get to moving on to where this team was ranked, we kind of teased it a little bit earlier with them being ranked third. They're unselfish. Like that's the thing. Is like you don't have to worry about. No one's like gonna be pissed off if they don't get their shots, right? Because it's coming from everywhere. Like it's not a situation where if Jaylin Stewart doesn't get a lot of run in one game Well, maybe he's hot, in the fourth game of the year, and he gets 27 points because he just can't miss, right? But as soon as people adjust to that, we kick it to Liam. They adjust to him. They kick it to Ahmad. Like all the young guys understand that. So I really liked how the team played for an October game. It's kind of crazy.
Sure.
But let's get into we're gonna go pay one bill, and then we're gonna come back for the talk of where it was. Obviously number 3 in the AP poll. Fair. I know some who don't think so, and most notably, I can think of one very influential Husky head coach that didn't think it was very fair. We'll talk about that coming up after this. What's up, UConn fans? It's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we pulled over $10,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With Roy, the app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, they don't make you a video, you get your money back. This week, I'm supporting TJ Sheffield. I just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show TJ the love and keep connecting to your school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. If you're already on Roy, any contribution to an athlete's campaign all should get you entered into a contest automatically. No purchase necessary to win 2 free tickets to a later game. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_that for more information. Support Roy, support the players, change the game. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn. Dan, you're unmuted, which is good, so we can hear your thoughts. What do you think about that? That's that player platform where it's different than if you were to, I think we all give to Storr Central and Bleeding Blue for Good, but if you wanted to even if it's not basketball, if you got a baseball player that you wanted, I think you're doing women's basketball, men's basketball, football, and baseball right now, and they're getting into women's volleyball and stuff like that in the future. What do you think about that platform where essentially if you're a big fan of Jaylin Stewart, you can just go throw him $1,000 to kind of put in his coffers for NIL?
If you like college sports and enjoy watching these guys play, help them out.
Right?
There were times back when I was in college, my sister who went to UConn, she would come home with stories of these guys using their lunch money stipends to buy Jordans. That should have never been the way it was. If you like these guys, support them in any way you can.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's also different because I love supporting Bleeding Blue for Good and Jared and the guys over there. But that's like a big pot, right? And they disperse it however they see fit. But this is kind of different. You can kind of get involved individually. Yeah. But anyway, so my thoughts on the number one or 2 or 3 in the AP poll, I think it's fair. But what I will say is and I'm going to echo, I know I'm going to sound like a Dan Hurley homer, and this is, again, my wife says this to me all the time. She's like, she's like, shave your head and shave your beard, and put on a pair of glasses, and you're how you react is him. And that may be true. I don't know if we look alike because you can't see my face. But what I want to see is, what do they need? What does UConn have to do? Do they have to go undefeated this year plus win another national championship for them to be ranked the consensus number 1? Because he brought up a great point in Dave Borges' article, and I read only a piece of it today because I've been running around like a crazy person. But it's you have a back-to-back national champion. This would have been a great story to put them number 1 to start.
Sure.
Give the benefit of the doubt that this team actually builds from within and that we brought back pieces. They also brought in a top 10 recruiting class. It's just the math's not mathing to me. What are your thoughts?
The last 2, first of all, Kansas was preseason number 1 last year. And the previous year, when we won our first championship of the 2 in a row, UConn wasn't even ranked top 25 preseason. So to all the people, I understand we've won 2 in a row now, and we want our flowers. But in the end, does it really matter?
No, of course not. But I think also
I know
it matters to Dan. It matters to him. And so, and I don't mean to be like weird about that, but it matters to him. So it should matter to us from the respect of he's worked for this and he deserves it. He does. Forget about what this team hasn't done. I can't say the word I want to say on the podcast network, but this team hasn't done yet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that. And so 3 is fair. Is it right? I don't think so.
I think, to your point of wanting the recognition, but more so thinking that they deserve it, which they probably do. You win 2 championships in a row with, I did something on Twitter after they won the second one in a row last year. The 2 championship teams that Hurley's had the last few years, those 2 championships of every single NCAA have brought them back less minutes on the roster than any other championship team in the history of college basketball. That in itself speaks volumes as to why they should get the recognition despite any roster turnover. They have proven 2 years in a row now. They haven't lost a game in the tournament by less than 10 points for 2 years in a row. And that's with the 14 games in a row. So with the most roster turnover of any championship teams in the history of NCAA basketball. So if you want to use, metrics, numbers, there you go. Kansas, by the way, has a number of new transfer portal players. Yes, they're loaded. The roster turnover is the same there. So, I get it. His brother played for Duke in the 90s. He is used to being and seeing how a team, I don't want to use the word privileged, but if this was Duke winning 2 national championships in a row in the 90s, you don't think that they would be, I don't know if they were, ranked number 1 after those 2 championships, but
I think you're right, but I also think of it from this perspective, and to make a correction, I kind of screwed you up there. It's it's 12 games in a row in the tournament, obviously, by 14 points. That's the minimum. They've won by 14 plus points in 12, and it's gotten better. The year before it was
they were making everybody money the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I know I sure did. But I'm going to ask you. I'm just going to go run it down. Since Kansas finished 18th in the AP poll last year. I know they reloaded.
Yep.
They're preseason number 1. That's privilege. If Houston had won a championship last year because people love Kelvin Sampson, the dude won AP Coach of the Year last year over Dan Hurley for no good reason.
I made a stink about that one at the time.
If I know, and if they had won a national championship last year, if I can't think of his name. If he didn't get hurt against Duke and they went to the Final Four and they beat UConn in the final, they'd be preseason number 1. If Duke won, they'd be preseason number 1. North Carolina, Arizona. I'm literally just running through. Purdue. If Purdue had won this year, everyone would have ranked them in the top 5 at least, but they're 14th. It's Indiana. Indiana's another one that people love. If Indiana's not that good because we don't know anything about these guys that are coming in, and they're 17th in the AP poll. It's laziness, and it's all about who they like as a coach. And let's face it, Dan doesn't make a lot of friends.
Of all the things they have climbing the mountaintop the last 2 years, they kind of did it as an unsung team in 22. 22, 23, they were not as, highly touted as last year's team. I think everyone knew how good last year's team was coming into the season, but the year prior, they weren't, as nobody even knew who Andre Jackson was yet. And they won that despite a number of losses. I think they were 500 in the Big East that year. But adding all that together, it's like Hurley's tenure at UConn. He's been here. This is, I think, 7th year. He had to turn the entire program around. He sees what the work, that administration, the school has done every single year. Their players are getting better. Teams are getting better. I think they've just only got so many more boxes to check on this, magical run. Last year, I think, was the first year they ever, even any of the championship years prior, had never finished number 1 in the AP to end the season. You can win a championship and not finish number 1 in the AP, which is insane. They had never finished one before. So that was almost like the last thing that they needed to check. But now it's, okay, we've won 2 in a row. Now we need another challenge. What is that? Give us the preseason number 1 ranking and see if we can defend the title for a 3rd time. So I know he's aware of all of that. And I think that's probably adding to some of the frustration on his end is it's not getting that number 1 spot. But
For
It's not
sure.
where he starts, where he finishes. So we'll see.
That's right. Well, and as fans and players should have that exact same mindset of it's not where you start, it's where you finish. But during the preseason, I'm going to allow Dan Hurley the latitude to dunk on all these idiots for not ranking them number one.
We could go one week into the Maui Invitational and the other early on tournaments that everyone's going to be playing in the first week of the season and be number one after a week. So hold tight. We'll see. Some of these teams could slip up early in these tournaments.
That's
we'll
true.
See.
All right. Before we get into the last segment of the day, we talked about this pre-show as well. What do you want to see this season? Like, not necessarily predictions. We can do that one day where we kind of go through the season and kind of give me your prediction of where you think they're going to trip up, or what the records are. We can kind of come back to it at the end of the year. What do you want to see from this UConn men's basketball team going forward?
Yeah, I think there's some question marks to see who the decidedly, if they're going to have a decided starting five to start the season and where that might finish, or is Terrace Reed going to find his way into the starting rotation by, mid or by the end of the season? But I think every championship team, and hopefully this one is that, usually gets contributions from not an unsung star, but someone that emerges mid-season and really develops into someone that a team can turn to in crunch time, and just develops into something that really contributes every single night that you didn't really necessarily think might be that guy at the beginning of the season. I think Solo Ball could be that guy. I think Terrace Reed could be that guy. I want to see the emergence of who's going to be the Andre Jackson Jr. on this team, who's going to be I don't know if, we're going to have any All-Americans, but Tristan Newton's junior season, no one saw that coming. And he became an instant spark plug, a guy that you could turn to when the ball necessarily wasn't going in the hoop or wasn't moving. He could go in and do some things and get aggressive, and eventually became, an All-American. So who on this team is going to emerge as a guy that maybe you necessarily didn't think was going to be a star, and doesn't even need to be a star, but someone, on a night where, similar to last season early on when we played Kansas in Kansas, no one could get anything going. Cam Spencer hurts his foot. Points are hard to come by. And Tristan was just, jacking from three and kept us in the game. They didn't win, but that was just kind of a staple of who he was. So I'm going to be looking on this squad, who's going to be that guy.
No, it's a great point. And I'll point to one game that I remember vividly because I did a whole podcast on it that's like 45 minutes long. If you want to watch it, listen to it. Fans love it. It's the 99 championship season. But the way I don't know if this team can be as good as that team, because that was a really special program, a special time for this program. But in that game alone, in the finals, they played 12 guys because they needed to rotate. And very similarly, didn't have, Jake Bosco was a shot blocker, but not to the extent of Donovan Clingan. They were going up against a guy like Elton Brand. In that game, Suleiman Wan contributed, Jake Bosco, Albert Mooring, Roshmel Jones. Edmund Saunders had a great game. So, this team could potentially be that towards the end of the year, where it doesn't matter who gets in foul trouble. Next man up, boom, we're ready to go. That's what I'm looking forward to your point. And then on a tactical perspective, everyone's worried about the interior defense. I'm more worried about, and I shouldn't be worried because we have Dan Hurley as a coach, rotational effort, because as I just mentioned, you don't have Donovan Clingan. You don't have the most impactful player in college basketball. You don't have Steph Castle, who was probably the best on-ball defender in college basketball last year, and also is probably going to win Rookie of the Year this year for the NBA. So I think for us, it's really just about seeing who's the unsung hero or potential unsung hero every other night, but also we got to get better with our rotational defense. We got to be able to play a little differently this year, play defense without fouling. If they score on you, they score on you. We have plenty of weapons. I don't think people are going to be able to match us. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is kind of looking at how this defense shapes out. All right, let's move on. We have one more topic of the day, but I got to tell some people about FanDuel. So we're going to talk about that right after this. What's up, NFL fans? You can start the season with big returns on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So right now, if you got a hunch for Thursday's game and you want to check the latest stats, you can do the live play-by-play during the game on the same place where you place your bets. You don't have to go back and forth with different things. So you can get started if you're a new customer with $5 bonus bet gets you $200. A $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets. It's a great deal. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we're back. Dan and I are talking this. Let's get off FanDuel. I have not done. I was doing really well on FanDuel, and then the UConn football game happened where I had them at minus 17, and I did not do very well.
I was there. Great finish.
I was still, that's one of those where you're mad that you lost the bet, but you're happy that they won because it was looking dire. All right, this is a very simple question. Heard this floated last night, and I thought it would be a cool topic to discuss. Should college basketball have a preseason? Last night, UConn played a scrimmage, exhibition, whatever you want to call it. And it was a great way because they got two local teams, Coaches versus Cancer, and raised money for a great cause. What are your thoughts?
Last night was awesome. Simply put, it was fun. It was different. It wasn't at one of the main two arenas, that we're used to playing at, Gampler XL. So it gave a different ripple. I think a lot of people, no one's ever seen UConn play a game there. It's an intimate setting. It's almost as if it's just a lower bowl at Gamble. I think the final number for attendance last night was about 7,900. So it's an intimate crowd. You're right on top of the court. There's not a bad seat in the house. After the game filters out, people kind of just meander into the casino, start gambling a little bit. So that was different. It's like watching a game in Vegas almost. But yeah, I thought it was really cool for the URI fans. Pulling into the parking garage, there's a ton of URI cars and decals. You could tell it was going to be a fun game for everybody. You get to watch your favorite team with no stakes. You obviously don't want to lose a game like that, but you get to test yourself early before it counts. And URI, they get to play against a great team. So I think it was cool for all the locals to be able to drive out to a place they're not used to going to and see a game in an intimate setting. And obviously raising the money for cancer was a bonus.
Yeah, because when you think about it, if you do it every year, and if you have let's say you have two of those, like UConn could do it with one of our guys, which Husky Ticket Project, you can get, get another team to come down to Hartford or, do it up at campus. Like even if you want to do it at like a lower level, my alma mater is Sacred Heart, have them play, Fairfield, like just do it kind of like a Fairfield Classic, if you will. Raise money for children's whatever. Anything you want. You can literally right now you can do it for hurricane relief. Like if it's throwing it together for something like that. So it just makes sense because
I think it's a little dicier to do it in people scrutinize the preseason for the NFL and they think that's a reason why when no guys are playing because they don't want to get hurt. Football is a way more physical sport. People do get hurt and it affects your season. So I understand not wanting to do it there. But in basketball, I know Stewie came up limping last night with a hampered ankle, but guys don't get hurt as much in basketball as football. So I don't think it's too much of a concern with regard to injury if that's what they are worried about. But
that's fair. It's a fair concern, but like also, that's up to the coaches to play who you want to play for however long, and not to let their kind of egos get in the way of like we need to win this game. It's more just like, hey, that's for the
I know
fans.
It's Hurley's ex team too. I know that was cool for him. He said after the game in the presser, like I effing love Rhode Island, which was funny, but I think he wants the extra reps for this squad. They've got a lot of new faces and they need to get in tune before they don't want to lose any games, whether it's out of conference in Maui or what, but they need all the reps they can get.
I don't disagree. And I think, you can really start to do it, anywhere like where I'm located in Greensboro. There's a centrally located Greensboro Coliseum. It's called something different now. I can't think of a New Horizon Center or something like that. You could have, Carolina play against High Point or something like that and just do an exhibition and really just get people live reps. 20,000 people would show up for that. And they would, they would raise a lot of money and have all the proceeds go to whatever charity you want. So it makes too much sense. It also gives, honestly, it was cool. I got to watch something that you guys could have watched on your local NBC Boston, but I got to watch it on the UConn Plus app for free.
How was the broadcast on there?
It was great. It was
color
NBC
commentary and everything. Yeah.
It was NBC Boston, so it wasn't. I think they simulcasted it through the app. So
got it.
Obviously that doesn't happen unless it's an exhibition, but it was great.
Right.
So yeah, I thought it was a well done event. Sideline reporting, the whole bit. It wasn't amateur hour. So it was good. It was professionally done. The views were great. Got all kinds of replay. So I would literally look forward to it if college basketball, who is notoriously terrible at marketing itself, started to do that more. Where
they could brand it. It was well branded with the Hall of Fame enshrinement. They showed some clips
for sure
of Billups and Vince Carter, which was cool. So I think people, if they didn't understand why it was happening at Mohegan, they quickly learned there with the production on the Jumbotron and all that. So yeah, I was all for it. Awesome.
Well, listen, guys, this is another episode of Locked On UConn. As we're welcoming Dan, he was on the live show last night because he was at the game. Dan's going to be kind of our part-time co-host Tuesday, Thursday. It's also great for me to talk to another UConn fan on a regular basis that is going to be at most, if not all, games at home. Yep. Yes. And another guy who loves this team as much as I do. And I'm really looking forward to it. You bring a lot to the show. You're obviously knowledgeable. I think it's a good thing for UConn fans to hear from other perspectives other than my own.
For sure. I'm excited to keep going. Let's do it.
All right, man. Well, listen, this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Mark Zanetto and Dan Meehan, this is Locked On UConn. We're asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, make sure those toughness meters always rise. And as always, go Huskies.